Apologies for the slight delay, and apologies for holding a lav mic like this, but we'll be passing it around, so it's going to be slightly exciting. But without further ado, welcome to our talk, Open Sesame, Unlocking Bluetooth Padlocks with Polite Requests. We'll do introductions in a moment, but just to kind of do a bit of a preface, we did originally do this talk at BSES London 2023. This is a slightly updated version, so if you fall asleep during the beginning because you've seen it before, I won't hold it against you. Towards the end, you might want to switch on. So let's do some quick introductions. Starting with myself, my name is Miłosz. In my past life, I used to teach at the University of Southampton. Luckily managed to get out of that, but that was mostly kind of introductory computer science and then later on cybersecurity. In my current life, I'm the mobile security lead at Reversec, very recently rebranded, very exciting stuff. And I also dabble in a little bit of IoT, a little bit of thick client testing, kind of various stuff here and there. I like power metal, I like the color purple. You can find me on Twitter, and I think I technically have a blue sky. And I'll pass on my mic to Alex.
Hello, hello. My name is Alex. I'm a cybersecurity consultant at the same company, unsurprisingly. I like locks, I like mobile hacking, I like IoT devices. And the Uni of Warwick was my first choice, but they rejected me based on the grades the government thought I would have got if I wasn't in isolation. So that's me.
Perfect, thank you, Alex. So, let's talk about why we're here, and I don't mean that like a philosophical sense, I mean why we're here right now. We're here to talk about something that started as an intern project. Alex did the work, I did the supervising. And it's kind of a cross-section of physical and mobile, which is where my interest came in. The original goals were to kind of build up a little bit of understanding of Bluetooth and BLE specifically, build a little bit of experience in mobile application reverse engineering, especially with applications that are a little bit obfuscated, maybe not immediately trivial to sort of look into. We got some interesting findings, as you'll soon find out. And our goals for today is primarily to entertain you. I will be completely honest about this, but we also want to convey some of the technical understanding and talk about the process so that you can possibly go out and do similar things yourself. So the key questions of the project, are whether a malicious user or a malicious device could just like listen in on the communications between the mobile phone and the lock. Could they tamper with the lock in any other way to get it to pop open? And how much information would you realistically need to do any of that? So let's introduce the locks themselves. We're talking about locks that I'm going to refer to as E-Link Smart, but they have been seen under a bunch of other brands. So we've seen them as Anvela, especially in Germany. We've seen them as EC Smart. We've seen them as other random no-name brands as well. They show up quite a lot in the UK, and they are quite heavily advertised to this day, despite our talk in 2023. They're cheap, so they're accessible, and seemingly they're quite popular in other marketplaces. We say Germany and Poland here. Poland actually turns out to be wrong, as you'll soon see. In terms of functionality, some of them have keys, all of them have local fingerprint off, or at least they did back then. I realize I'm holding one here that doesn't. And most of them have remote Bluetooth unlock done by a mobile app. So you grab your mobile app, you've got your locks registered, you push a button and the lock pops open for you. That's the idea. And then they kind of advertise the idea of, oh, you know, if somebody else is at your lock, but you're not there, you can just send them the credentials to unlock the lock and magic happens. That's supposedly the selling point. I don't know. Here's what they look like. You'll see more of them soon. And here's where they are in the world. Now, eagle-eyed amongst you might have seen me struggling with Google Earth earlier today, trying to do a live demo of Google Earth and panning around the Earth. I was getting about 2 FPS, so you get screenshots. But that's roughly the locations of the locks that we know exist. And this is why I'm saying you can see Poland may be actually not that popular. They're also here, and they are primarily here. A little bit of foreshadowing, I actually have the very lock from this photo here, and it still has the label on it. It says a little thing on it that says, please register first, experience mode, anyone can unlock, which is a bit of foreshadowing for what we're about to get to. And with that, I'll hand over to Alex, who will talk about our tooling, approach, and process of actually finding things.
Yes. So the methodology here was fairly simple. The idea was we would intercept the BLE, we'd reverse engineer the application, and we'd try and check the HTTP communication. The tools were Wireshark, Frida, JADX, ADB, Burp Suite, the ones. So quick primer on BLE, if you don't know how BLE works. Short-range communication over radio. It's typically using encryption. You've got sort of a whole kind of weird protocol that doesn't matter at all for this talk. It's data in, it's data out that's sent over MAC addresses. The way we intercepted BLE was using this little dongle here, the Nordic Semiconductor NRF52840 dongle, which is very useful for this sort of thing. Alternatively, if you don't have access to one of these, even though they're £5, you can just go into Android, turn on HCI sniffing in the developer tools, and look at the packet dump there. But this is the one we use because we wanted to look at it from an external perspective, and this is the sort of data we were getting back. However, this was all sort of garbage to us at this point in time, so we'd have to sort of reverse engineer it and have a look at what they were. So yeah, look, garbage. You look through them. They all seem to be of a set size, unless they were smaller than it, so we could kind of deduce that they were being split up, sent in multiple packets. The data itself was pretty much entirely random, except the first, 4 little nibbles there. So given that it was 16 bytes each sort of packet, we sort of had the idea that it was probably using some kind of encryption. So we would have to go into the mobile app to figure out how that encryption was happening. So this was done using JADX, which is a great mobile application decompiler. Java is one of those wonderful, wonderful languages that doesn't actually compile to any kind of machine code. So reversing it is really easy. It was obfuscated, obviously, but not by much, and it was full of like these weird custom log statements, which you'll see an example of next. So you'll see here are some of the log statements. This would sort of be the class name, this would be the function. No, that's the function, that's something else. But generally speaking, you'd get a lot of these logs and you'd start to figure out what kind of stuff it was doing. And you can see here, unlock cloud password here, and then you've got some, byte stuff going on up here. But going through the different variables, seeing what was passed to this function, where this function was passing data to, you could start to kind of decompile it and figure out what was going on. So you can see here, this was the before, this is the after. So manual work, sort of just typing in the names of each of the functions to figure out what they were. But we've got here, right at the bottom, encrypt data. So how does the data get encrypted? This is how the data gets encrypted. It runs encrypt data. AES, ECB, very nice. It uses one AES key. It uses the same AES key all the time for all of the mobile apps, which is great. It's what you want. Great crypto there. So, quick primer between the differences between symmetric and asymmetric encryption. However, in this instance, it was just symmetric encryption. We know the key. We know all of the keys for all of the locks because it's the same one. And we can start sort of decrypting stuff. So here is a decrypted packet. This was specifically the unlock cloud password one from before. They all have the same sort of structure. They've got a length. They've got a command code. They've got a login token. And then for this one, it was a current date and an ASCII encoded passkey. So this is the unlock. All it really requires here is this passkey, and then gets encrypted with that same AES key, and then that gets sent off to the lock itself. So how does it unlock? Because there was also that login token earlier. So it sends a login token, which was just a random sort of 4 bytes to prevent replay attacks. It then requests an unlock by sending it the 6-digit passkey, and then the lock opens. So great. We now know enough to perform a replay attack, kinda. If we intercept a unlock request from an app to the device, we just decrypt the communications, we take the passkey out of that, and then we put it into further ones, which is nice and easy. So what actually is the passkey? Where does it come from? So it never changed all of the time when we were unlocking it. It always stayed the same, including between resets, factory resets, and between mobile devices. It's always the same key. So this is your part. Okay, back to Miłosz.
So, one slide into my part. I thought you would eventually realize. Yeah, so we were talking about the sort of unlock stuff. We now know that there is a passkey being exchanged. What we now want to know is where that passkey comes from. And there's a few kind of likely scenarios here. So you might be thinking, oh, maybe it's hard-coded in every single lock. Maybe it's the same passcode everywhere. Hopefully not, but it's a possibility. Maybe it is in some way derived from information about the lock. Maybe it's like a hash of a MAC address. Maybe it's something that is in some way calculated from details of the lock. That would also be pretty bad, but we've seen a lot of bad stuff already, so this could also be it. Or it might be coming from the web, which currently seems like the most likely option, especially when you think about how the application works. Obviously, we haven't shown you the application, but the behavior is such that you need to be online to pair with a new lock. The offline functionality seemed a lot like an afterthought, so if you haven't had this set up first, you couldn't get any information. Seems highly likely that it will be coming from the web. So, inspecting the traffic between the mobile application and the cloud services, we eventually start to narrow down on a few API endpoints that might be of interest, the most important one being get lock info by MAC. And this is roughly what a request to it looks like. So it's a fairly standard post request. You tell it that you want to get info by MAC. I'm just going to give myself a laser pointer. There we go. Get lock info by MAC. And then you provide the MAC address of the lock, a username and a login token, and then some two things that we don't know what they do, a type and a CP. Okay. And what that responds with is something like this. So it tells us that the operation was successful twice, once in English, once in Chinese, very helpful. It reiterates the basic information of the lock to us, so it gives us its name, it gives us its MAC address, but it also gives us something called admin password. And upon inspection, that turns out to be the piece of information that we were missing for all of the commands. So in theory, we now understand the full chain. We know that the mobile application communicates with the API to get the unlock code. The mobile application itself talks to the lock, gets a temporary token to prevent like complete replay attacks. Then it constructs the unlock request, fairly straightforward, plops all the information in order, encrypts it with the hard-coded AES key, sends it to the lock, and provided the lock is happy, it pops open. So you know about that request. I told you it takes a MAC address, username, login token, so presumably some authentication and authorization going on, and two things we don't know. Well, it turns out that it's quite okay with the username and login token being completely meaningless. They don't actually seem to do very much, and in fact, it doesn't particularly matter if they're there. This is still a valid request, and again, to those maybe slightly less familiar with Bluetooth, the MAC address is public information. That is what it uses to broadcast to say, hey, I'm a Bluetooth device, you can connect to me. So the only thing we need to request the code that at least in theory unlocks every lock is its MAC address, which means we must be next to it, which we probably are if we want to unlock it. Which brings us to putting it together and producing a POC, which is once again Alex's part.
So now we know what to do, and now we can make a proof of concept. So look for all the locks, request the password from the API, which we don't need login for, which is great. Connect to the lock, get the temporary token, send the key we just got totally legitimately, and the lock will open. It's great. And now we're going to try a demo, which is definitely going to work first try. There's no way it's not going to work.
It's going to be fine. I need to do a few things. I need to do this, and I need to make sure that you guys can see it as well, which you now can. And then, cool. So, I'm going to do a few things. You can now see a combination of a Windows PowerShell window, I'm sorry, I'm a Windows user, and a view from this phone. Hello. So, I'm going to do a few things. I'm going to turn these locks on. They need to be powered on. Hopefully none of them will recognize my fingerprint. None of them did. So I should be able to just run this script, provided that I'm online and provided that nothing else has exploded. And in a moment, it should tell us that it can see 3 locks. It should tell us there are MAC addresses. It could only see 2, so we'll probably see just 2 unlocks. But one of them popped open. I think it was this one. And this one. So it didn't see the big black one. I'll try and move it just slightly closer. Is that still in view? Yeah. Let's try that again. I would really like for 3 of them to open.
I'm sure you can tell from this demo they are very high quality electronic products.
Yeah, so this one apparently, it's no longer advertising. I can't see it. I'll give it one more try. No. Okay, well, please believe me, it used to unlock. I think right now it just isn't going to unlock by anything. Perfect. So let me switch things back away from demo mode. Okay, and we have a backup with 4 locks in it, and you can see the black one was in there, and it was very happily unlocking back then. So I'm actually going to let that play out just so you can see it actually was popping open. So again, same thing, powering them on, running a script that we've written that finds the locks, puts together the packets, and then sends them in order to unlock. So yeah, it's found 4, and then it sends lock open signals to one after the other, and you can kind of actually hear them clunk, because I had sound on for this. Nice and chunky.
Very loud.
Yeah. Cool. And I'll hand over to you to carry on with the other endpoints.
Yes. So, not only was there one that gave you the password, there were other ones too. This one has to be my favorite because it would give you the latitude and longitude. How the app worked is every time you unlocked it using the mobile app, it would create an unlock record. You could optionally enable location tracking for those unlock records, and those were obviously public information, because why wouldn't they be? So, there we go. So, got lack of authorization, lack of authentication. They were completely ignored by the application, which is fantastic. The encryption material are extremely ineffective because you could just pull it straight from the mobile app. And the static passkeys were endlessly reusable. They never changed. The user couldn't change them. Fantastic. What more could you ask for? Possible mitigations that you could perform. You could switch locks into fingerprint-only mode. You could sort of cut out the battery and USB port and just use it as a keyed lock. We didn't show this earlier, but this one here has a actual key in the bottom, like a keyhole, and it would be the heaviest and most useless padlock you could own, which is great. And then anything else to actually solve the real underlying issues would require the manufacturer. And of course, we did contact the manufacturer. And as you can guess, we had an extremely timely, prompt response that fixed all of the issues. Except we didn't. We tried contacting them. They never really responded to us. We disclosed it publicly with the blog post, with a B-Sides London talk, and with this talk as well. But they never really fixed it at this point in time. So these were the conclusions we had 2023 time. Sort of don't buy it, it's terrible. Except do buy it if you want to have fun hacking a lock. The vendor might fix things, but we had no assurance of that. Other cheap brands are known to have similar issues. This intern project was sort of covering a handful of locks that were available. This was the most egregious example, but generally speaking, cheap products offering Bluetooth smart unlocking, don't trust them. They're not going to be good. They're almost always going to be untrustworthy. This is also probably not going to get better. Without proper standards and regulations, which will be incredibly difficult to implement. But flip side is, you can look into similar issues. It was a fun project, endlessly enjoyable. Who doesn't love hacking a lock? All of this stuff was really easy to figure out, really easy to get my hands on. Quite very simple tooling, JADX, ADB, one standard Android device, which could have just been a virtual Android device. The interceptor for the Bluetooth, that costs 15 quid. Very easy to get into, and I highly recommend that you hack everything all of the time. So, I'm now handing back to Miłosz for the update.
Yeah, so that was the state of the talk as of 2023. We are preparing for this talk, and one of the things that I tend to do before I do a live demo somewhere is check whether it still works. In the meantime, I've also acquired a new padlock from the same brand. It's very samey, slightly different. This time on the body it says eSmart Lock, which is different from eLink Smart, but it was actually being sold as Anvela. And that was the only brand I could find it under. Whatever, doesn't matter. It doesn't have a fingerprint scanner, but we get other fun bits because it takes a PIN code entry. And now I get to set my own PIN code to unlock it, which is interesting because previously we had some idea of 6-digit passcodes, but they were never user set, they just came from space. Whereas this time I'm being asked, oh, set your passcode. And I set it to something very mature, which if I type the very mature number and press OK, it opens. It also has RFID card unlock. I haven't really gotten into it that deep, but I suspect it is exactly as secure as you expect. And of course, there's still Bluetooth unlock. So logically, obviously, if I added this lock to my live demo before, it would have popped open. But it wasn't. The script very happily pulls up a passcode. It pulls out the passcode that I've set for this, for typing. So I know it's something, related to my lock, but it doesn't unlock. So, at this point, I don't really have any insight into the communication between it. It doesn't really come up with an error or anything. It just does not unlock. So clearly the API hasn't changed. That would be crazy. We can still get a pin from it. It's just that it's the physical pad pin, not the pin that facilitates the Bluetooth unlock. So clearly something changed in the implementation of the Bluetooth. And that means that we have to go back to reversing. Reversing a newer version of the application. Turns out, we told you before about the log statements and how helpful they were to reverse engineer, because even though they've obfuscated all the class and function names, you could still find out exactly what they were named from associated log statements. They have now removed almost all of them, very conveniently leaving in just one so I can still quickly find the right class, but otherwise getting rid of everything. So A, clearly they've seen that people are messing with this stuff, and B, they're going the laziest possible route of trying to resolve it by making it a little bit harder for people to figure out what's going on, not by making what's going on any better. But okay, looking at that, it doesn't look like anything has actually changed, but in the API, we were always grabbing admin password, and this is grabbing something else. This is grabbing something called password. But when we were testing around, that was usually empty. So what gives? If we played around with just testing the API via Burp Suite, we would just get an empty string for password, but I really need it right now. But then looking at Burp Suite inspecting the actual legitimate application, I am getting it. So something is wrong. And at this stage, I realize that we've made some assumptions, and we've made some assumptions back in 2023, which don't necessarily hold today. The authentication and authorization scheme we previously told you is quite flaky. It turns out it is still very flaky, but it is flaky in fun ways. I had to draw this out because it's quite easy to get lost. So, the API server presents itself on both HTTP and HTTPS, and they have distinct behavior. So HTTPS, first things first, is doing mutual TLS, and it's doing mutual TLS with a hard-coded key in the application. That key also happens to be the private key of the server, ha ha ha. Anyway, if you go over HTTPS, it asks you to authenticate first. So it checks if the username and login token, which we previously showed you, are actually valid. So is the username valid, and is the login token presented for that username correct? So actually, we have some authentication, and if it fails, you just get kicked out. If authentication passes, then we do authorization, and then we return the data. Now, if you go the HTTP route, so you get rid of MTLS as well, the username and login token no longer matter. You can just make requests over plaintext HTTP. No authentication needed. But it does check if the username in the request matches the owner of the lock. So I don't need to log in as the user, but I need to know who they are. And if I provide the right username, if I provide my username for my lock, then it gives me the password. If I don't, then it gives me this reduced data set, which still has the admin password. It still has sufficient information to unlock the lock, but not Bluetooth. Okay. So that took a while, but we now understand it. So now the task is a little bit more complicated. If I really want to unlock this with Bluetooth, I need to know the username. And of course, the API happily discloses a lot of information, but the information is a bit odd, because like you can get a list of locks owned by a numeric user ID, but the numeric user ID is not the username. And that just means that we're trading one piece of information for another. We now need to know the numeric user ID rather than the username. So that's still iterating over potentially hundreds of thousands of people. The unlock log that we talked about before, the one that if you change an option tells you location, that includes the username of who unlocked the lock. So that could feasibly be a way of getting information. But what if the user never BLE unlocked it? I mean, most of them probably will have, but you know, I want something that will work. I want something that will 100% full stop work. And this is where I have to make a bit of a confession, because we may have omitted a tiny detail up until this moment. We've omitted it in 23 as well. We really didn't want to talk about it until we were really sure that the vendor is not interested. I don't know how much of explaining I need to do of this. But anybody who's not familiar with SQL injection, essentially we have a pretty strong suspicion at this point that by providing malformed data, we can interact with the database of the application directly. Again, they know. We told them, and in fact others before us did tell them as well. There was a blog post by Nuit who did kind of similar work on these locks. He focused less on the BLE and more on the API side of things, but he's also pointed out that there is SQLi, and he pointed out where exactly it is. So this is as public as information gets. And 2.5 years later, this is still unfixed. Okay, fine, let's just put it in SQL map, extract a payload, and get ourselves a script that just works. And I'm going to demo that very quickly. So I can throw these off. We know we can unlock those, except for the one that didn't work. I'm going to switch my OBS back over to this. I'm going to give you a view as well by doing that. And now if I run the brand new second function of this tool, it's going to instead abuse the SQL injection to get the password, thus bypassing any need for me to know what the username of this person is. It just finds the password and pops it open just the same. And that, I suspect, unless they eventually start fixing things, is going to work forevermore. And I doubt they're going to start fixing things. So that brings us to our updated set of conclusions. They haven't really changed much. Don't buy this crap. Unless you're doing it for fun. If you're doing it for fun, great. But I don't think these are getting fixed anytime soon. And even when they improved things, like they improved the obfuscation, they tried to remove one of the passwords, but previously they were giving it in 2 places, now they're giving it in 1. They can still be popped in 100 different ways, and honestly, we've barely scratched the surface here. You can just walk up to the pin lock, so if I use the previous script, it would just show you the password that I've set for the pin pad. I'm already in vicinity of the lock anyway, whether I'm doing it over Bluetooth or whether I'm typing it in, no difference. You can get the password by supplying the right username, which you probably can get from the unlock log. You can abuse SQLi, again, things you probably haven't thought about. Sometimes the oldest trick in the book, like adding a single quote and a double quote into a query, is all you need, and it will work very happily. And you should go and mess it out with cheap IoT devices. And that's us, unless you have any questions. Go ahead.
You speak a lot about IoT. Have you played around with any of the TP-Link devices that have been?
TP-Link, no, not directly. I think you've got a camera that you're raring to
They're on my hit list.
Okay.
They're on my list.
Yeah, okay. They seem to have a lot of problems as well.
Yeah, I would expect them to. Honestly, it's a lot of the time, and I mean that's quite common in sort of offensive security. Cheap IoT devices are a very good way to get hands-on experience quickly. because they're usually bad and they're usually fun. Go on.
I watch Lockpicking Lawyer quite a lot, and so he covers some of these Bluetooth type things, but he covers it more from the physical side.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask, have you looked into the physical security very briefly of these? Like, can they be opened by magnets and kind of that sort of stuff?
Yeah, so yeah, I think that's probably you.
That's a me, yeah. So I am in my free time a bit of a lockpicker myself. So I do know quite a bit about the physical security on these. So inside, it's a set of, it's a slider lock. I tried picking it, I couldn't, but I'm not very experienced with picking slider lock specifically. In terms of generic security, obviously these ones have a shackle that's like a few millimeters thick. These could get through like nothing, and I don't trust the casing either. It feels like quite cheap metal. These ones, the shackle is also unhardened and is fairly thin steel, so that could be cut through with bolt cutters fairly quickly. In terms of non-destructive attacks, such as using the hammer to tap it open or using magnets would be very doable, but we didn't attempt it because it was too much effort, and there were easier ways to get into them. But there's basically one motor inside that opens it. If you have a drill with a magnet next to that motor, it will probably unlock it. Interestingly, they use ball bearings as the locking mechanism, and there's ball bearings on both sides of the lock. And the way they've set it up is that you can't easily shim the lock open or tap it open with a hammer. It's actually interesting. They've done at least a handful of protections against basic non-destructive physical attacks. They just completely failed with the rest of it. But yeah, so most of the easy ones, actually no obvious bypasses that I could see besides breaking it. And then lockpicking, I couldn't do it, but I don't know slider locks very well. So yeah.
Any more? Okay.
I was gonna.
Yeah, go on.
You mentioned about the longitude and the latitude, right? How much information? I'm wondering, can you get people house location from that? How far can you go with it?
So these are real locations of real locks. I just haven't zoomed in close enough for you to be able to narrow them down to houses. They are quite high precision. Back when we were playing around with these, we could feasibly identify locks that were near us. So in theory, if you really wanted to take this to its logical psychotic conclusion, then yes, you look for locks that are near you, you walk up to them and you unlock them because the app gives you everything.
Also, additionally, the location tracking was disabled by default. However, because of the total lack of authentication and authorization, you could enable other people's location tracking remotely. So even if you didn't have it turned on, you could turn it on for them, wait till they unlocked it, and then you'd get their location. And it wouldn't show up any sort of additional notification in the app because the app always requested location permissions, 100% of the time. Even if you're not using location, it would still request it. So the fact that it's turned on or off is basically invisible to the user, which is great.
What a mess.
Yeah, basically, if you can think of something that they've done wrong, the answer is probably yes, and we probably haven't seen half of it. Cool, go ahead.
Curiosity, how did you enumerate the location of the locks? You just go through the MAC addresses?
So yeah, there's multiple ways of doing it. Obviously, again, we've got SQLi. We can just dump the database of all unlock logs. There is also an endpoint that gives you a pretty thorough list of all MAC addresses and an endpoint that gives you unlock logs per MAC address. So it's a small script to get to the point where you can start dumping them. Those locations we showed you might be slightly out of date because they're from the original 2023 stuff, but I mean, it gives you an idea of they're everywhere. Cool. I'm still open for questions, but I'll just show this QR code. I know people love QR codes. If you want to see the companion blog post to this, here it is. It goes into a little bit more detail about some of the things that we sort of glossed over as obvious that make more sense in writing rather than sort of showing them on slides one after the other. There will be a follow-up post on the stuff in the but wait, there's more section. That will happen when I find the time, so give me a year maybe. And a link to Nuit's post, because again, this guy did a good amount of this stuff before we even knew about it. And they just had slightly worse SEO than we did, and we never found it until too late. And otherwise, if you want to learn more about us as a company or us as people, I mean, we have a website, but you can also just talk to us. We're here. Yeah, so that's us. Thank you very much for listening.